The DNA test results were still warm from the printer when my world collapsed. 23 years of being Sarah's father, and the stranger she chose over me. He might actually be her real dad. My name is David, and I'm sitting in my daughter's abandoned bedroom at 3 a.m., holding 2 pieces of paper that have destroyed everything I thought I knew about family, love, and the cruel tricks life plays on the people who care the most. The first paper, a letter from Sarah telling me she's starting a new life with a man I've never met. The second, lab results that suggest this stranger might be the one person who had every right to take her away from me. 3 months ago, Sarah walked out of our house, not for college, not for a job, but to live with Marcus, a man who appeared out of nowhere claiming to have answers about her past. A man who knew things about her childhood that I thought only I knew. Things that made me question whether the little girl I raised, the one I taught to ride a bike, the one I held through pneumonia and heartbreak, was ever really mine to begin with. You see, Sarah was adopted. We never hid that from her, but what we didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Marcus might be her biological father. The father who supposedly wanted nothing to do with her when she was born. The father who, according to Sarah's letter, has been looking for her for over 2 decades. But here's what's destroying me from the inside out. What if every "I love you, Dad" was just her being polite? What if every hug, every proud moment, every sacrifice I made was just borrowed time until her real father showed up? What if the man she calls a stranger is actually the one person she's been waiting for her entire life? The letters she left behind didn't just break my heart, it shattered my understanding of what it means to be a parent. She wrote, "David, you gave me a good life, but Marcus gave me answers. He looks like me. He thinks like me. When I'm with him, I finally understand who I am." How do you compete with biology? How do you fight against the pull of blood when all you have to offer is 2 decades of love that suddenly feels like it might not be enough? But there's something else, something that makes this whole situation even more twisted. The DNA test I ran behind Sarah's back? It's not just about her and Marcus. It's about me and a secret I've been carrying for 23 years. A secret that, if Sarah knew the truth, might change everything about why I fought so hard to keep her, and why I'm so terrified of losing her to the man who might be her real father. I'm sharing this story because I know there are parents out there who felt this same terror. Adoptive parents, step-parents, anyone who's ever loved a child who wasn't biologically theirs and wondered if that love would be enough when the real thing came along. This isn't just about my pain, it's about what happens when the family you built gets challenged by the family someone was born into. So, if you've ever wondered if your love was enough, if you've ever feared that biology trumps everything, or if you're struggling to understand how someone can choose DNA over devotion, this story is for you. Because what I discovered in that letter, and what those DNA results revealed, will change everything you think you know about family, love, and the lengths a parent will go to protect their child, even when that child might not be theirs at all. Hit that like button if you believe love is stronger than blood. Drop a comment if you've ever felt like you had to prove your right to be called parent, and subscribe because this 10-chapter journey is going to take us through the darkest corners of what it means to be a family, and the shocking truth that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the bonds that hold us together. 3 in the morning. Sarah's room is exactly as she left it, but it feels like a mausoleum. Every object here has been touched by her hands. Every corner holds memories that now cut me like glass. The letter sits on the desk, next to the DNA results, and I can't stop reading the same lines that destroyed my life. "David, you gave me a good life, but Marcus gave me answers." Those words replay in my head like a broken record, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. 23 years of being her father, and she reduces it all to a good life. Not the life she wanted, not the life she deserved, just good enough. I remember the day we brought her home from the adoption agency. She was barely 3 months old, so small she fit in one of my hands. Linda cried holding her for the first time, and I promised both of them that I would protect this little girl with my life. I meant it then. I still mean it now, even though she's chosen someone else. The room smells like her perfume, that expensive one she bought with her first paycheck from the bookstore. I bought her a car that day too, a red Honda that she said made her feel independent. Independence. Maybe that's what this is really about. Maybe I held on too tight, loved too hard, tried too desperately to be everything she needed. But Marcus just had to exist. He didn't have to earn her love through sleepless nights when she had nightmares, or through teenage rebellion, or through the anxiety attacks that started in high school. He just had to show up with his genetics and his answers, and suddenly 23 years of love became secondary to biology. The DNA test results are still warm from the printer. I ran the test behind Sarah's back, using hair from her brush. The guilt of that betrayal sits heavy in my chest, but I had to know. I had to understand what I was up against. The results are clear. There's a 99.7% probability that Marcus is her biological father. The father who abandoned her before she was born. The father who allegedly spent years looking for her, according to Sarah's letter. The father who knew things about her childhood that made her question everything I thought we shared. My hands shake as I hold the papers. This isn't just about losing Sarah. It's about losing the very foundation of who I thought I was. I built my identity around being her father. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, every moment of joy was tied to that role. Without it, I'm just David. And I'm not sure David is enough. Tomorrow, I have to decide what to do with this knowledge. Do I tell Sarah about the test? Do I confront Marcus? Do I fight for the daughter who's already chosen someone else? Or do I let go of the only thing that ever made me feel like I had a purpose in this world? The clock ticks toward dawn, and I'm still sitting here, holding the remains of my shattered life. The first time I heard Marcus's name was on a Tuesday evening in March. Sarah came home from work with a strange look on her face, excitement mixed with something I couldn't identify. Fear, maybe, or recognition. She said a man had approached her at the bookstore, claiming to know things about her past that only family would know. He knew about my birthmark, she said, pulling up her sleeve to show the small crescent moon on her wrist. He knew I was adopted. He knew I was born in Portland General Hospital on October 15th. I remember the cold dread that settled in my stomach. We'd kept Sarah's adoption records sealed. The only people who knew those details were Linda, myself, and the adoption agency. So how did this stranger know information that had been locked away for over 2 decades? Maybe he saw your adoption papers somehow, I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. Or maybe he's some kind of scammer. There are people who target adopted children, Sarah. They prey on the desire to find biological family. But Sarah shook her head with a certainty that terrified me. Dad, he looks like me. Same eyes, same chin. When he smiled, it was like looking in a mirror. That night, I couldn't sleep. I spent hours researching Marcus Thompson, the name Sarah had given me. What I found made my blood run cold. He was a real person, 45 years old, living in Seattle. He'd been married and divorced twice, had a daughter from his first marriage who was now in college. He worked as a contractor, seemed to have a normal life. But then I dug deeper. Court records showed he'd been fighting the adoption for months before Sarah was born. He'd wanted to keep her, but Sarah's birth mother had refused to put his name on the birth certificate. The adoption had gone through despite his protests. For 23 years, he'd been looking for her, hiring private investigators, checking adoption registries, waiting. And somehow, he'd found her. The next few weeks were torture. Sarah would come home with stories about Marcus, how he'd taken her to lunch, how he'd shown her pictures of his family, how he'd explained why he'd never stopped searching for her. Each story felt like a knife twisting in my chest. He said he dreamed about me, Sarah told me one evening, her eyes bright with wonder. He said he always knew I was out there somewhere, and he never stopped believing he'd find me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her about the sleepless nights I'd spent when she had colic, the times I'd rushed her to the emergency room, the way I'd held her hand through every vaccination and scraped knee. But how do you compete with the romantic notion of a father who'd spent decades searching for his lost daughter? The breaking point came when Sarah started questioning things about her childhood. Things that had never bothered her before suddenly became significant. Why didn't she look more like Linda and me? Why did she prefer coffee to tea when we were both tea drinkers? Why did she have such a strong reaction to certain smells or sounds? Marcus says genetics are powerful, she explained. He says I probably inherited a lot of traits from him that I never understood before. I started having panic attacks, the kind where you can't breathe, where the world tilts sideways and you're convinced you're dying. Linda found me on the bathroom floor one night, hyperventilating and crying. "She's slipping away," I whispered to her. "I can feel her slipping away, and I don't know how to stop it." That's when I decided to run the DNA test. I needed to know if the man who was stealing my daughter was really her father, or if this was all some elaborate con. The results would either prove Marcus was a fraud or confirm my worst nightmare. Now I know the truth. Marcus is Sarah's biological father. The man I've feared, the man I've hated, the man I've blamed for destroying my family. He has every right to claim her, and I have no right to stop him. The hardest part isn't losing Sarah, it's understanding why I'm losing her. Every night I replay conversations, searching for the moment I failed her. Was it when I said no to the gap years she wanted? Was it when I insisted she go to college locally instead of following her dreams to New York? Was it when I held on too tight, trying to keep her safe in a world that I knew could be cruel? I've been thinking about my own father lately. The man who raised me wasn't my biological father either, though I didn't know that until I was 35. My mother told me on her deathbed, a confession that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. The man I'd called Dad for 3.5 decades wasn't genetically related to me, but he'd been there for every scraped knee, every baseball game, every moment that mattered. When I found out, I was angry, not at my stepfather, but at the lie, at the years of not knowing who I really was, at the questions that would never be answered because my biological father had died in a car accident when I was 5. Is that how Sarah feels now? Like she's been living a lie? Like the man who raised her was just a placeholder until her real father came along? The irony isn't lost on me. I know exactly what it feels like to discover that the man you thought was your father isn't your biological parent. But I also know what it feels like to be the father who isn't enough, who can't compete with the pull of DNA and the mystery of what might have been. I've been carrying a secret for 23 years, a secret that might change everything about how Sarah sees this situation. The day we adopted her, I made a choice that I've never told anyone about. Not Linda, not Sarah, not even myself in the quiet moments when I try to be completely honest. I knew Marcus existed. I knew he was fighting the adoption. I knew he wanted to keep Sarah, and I made sure he couldn't. I was the one who hired the lawyer who found the loophole. I was the one who pushed for the adoption to be finalized quickly before Marcus could get his legal affairs in order. I was the one who made sure Sarah's birth mother understood that Marcus would be a problem she didn't need to deal with. I told myself I was protecting Sarah. I told myself that a man who'd gotten a teenage girl pregnant and then disappeared couldn't be trusted to be a good father. I told myself that stability was more important than biology, that a planned family was better than a chaotic one. But the truth is simpler and more selfish than that. I wanted her. I wanted to be a father so desperately that I was willing to destroy another man's chance at fatherhood to make it happen. For 2 decades, I've lived with the guilt of what I did. I've watched Sarah grow up, celebrated her achievements, comforted her through heartbreak, and every moment of joy was tainted by the knowledge that I'd stolen her from the man who might have loved her just as much. Now, Marcus has found her anyway. Despite my best efforts, despite the legal barriers I put in place, despite the years of hoping he would give up and move on, he found her. And she's choosing him. Maybe this is karma. Maybe this is the universe's way of balancing the scales. Maybe I deserve to lose the daughter I stole from another man. But here's the question that's eating me alive. If Sarah knew the truth about what I did to keep her, would she hate me for it? Or would she understand that sometimes love makes us do terrible things? The answer terrifies me more than losing her does. I couldn't take it anymore. 3 weeks of watching Sarah light up every time she mentioned Marcus. 3 weeks of feeling like a stranger in my own home. 3 weeks of carrying the weight of my secret. I broke. I found his address online. Seattle, Washington. A 2-hour drive from Portland. I told Linda I was going to visit my brother, grabbed my keys, and drove north with no real plan except to look the man in the eye who was taking my daughter away from me. His house was modest, a small craftsman-style home with a well-maintained garden. I sat in my car for 30 minutes, watching, trying to work up the courage to knock on his door. What would I say? "Hi, I'm the man who stole your daughter 23 years ago, and I'd like her back?" When he answered the door, I understood immediately why Sarah had been so struck by their resemblance. He did look like her. The same dark hair, the same intelligent eyes, the same way of tilting his head when he was thinking. It was like seeing Sarah in 45 years, if she'd been born male. "You must be David," he said, and his voice was calm, almost gentle. "Sarah told me you might come by eventually." She'd told him I might come? That meant she'd been thinking about me, about how I was handling all of this. That had to mean something, right? "I need to understand," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "I need to understand why you're doing this now, why you couldn't just leave her alone." Marcus invited me in, offered me coffee, acted like we were old friends catching up instead of 2 men fighting over the same daughter. His house was filled with pictures, his other daughter, his ex-wives, his parents. But what caught my attention was the table in the corner, covered with documents, photographs, and what looked like a timeline. "I've been looking for her for 23 years, he said, following my gaze. "I never stopped, even when the lawyers told me to give up, even when my marriages fell apart partly because I couldn't let go, even when everyone said I was obsessed, I kept looking." "You left her mother," I said, the accusation sharp in my voice. "You got a teenager pregnant and abandoned her." Marcus's face darkened. "Is that what you think? That I just walked away?" He pulled out a folder from the table, thick with legal documents. "I was 19 years old, David. I found out about the pregnancy the same day I found out about the adoption papers. Sarah's mother had already decided to give her up. I fought for 6 months to stop it." He showed me court documents, letters from lawyers, records of payments he'd made to try to support a child he wasn't allowed to see. The timeline on his table wasn't just about finding Sarah. It was about 23 years of legal battles, private investigators, and a father's desperate search for his daughter. "I know what you did," he said quietly. I know you hired Richard Kellerman to find the loophole that expedited the adoption. I know you paid Sarah's birth mother's medical bills and legal fees. I know you made sure I couldn't get custody. My heart stopped. He knew. After all these years, he knew exactly what I'd done. I was protecting her, I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. You were protecting yourself, Marcus replied. You wanted to be a father, and you didn't care who you had to step on to make it happen. The conversation that followed was the most honest I'd had with anyone in decades. Marcus told me about the nights he'd driven by our house when Sarah was little, just to catch a glimpse of her. About the birthdays he'd celebrated alone, wondering what she looked like, what she was interested in, whether she was happy. I know you love her, he said. I can see it in how she talks about you. But David, I'm not trying to replace you. I'm trying to be part of her life too. She's choosing you, I said, and I hated how broken I sounded. She's choosing to understand where she came from, Marcus corrected. That doesn't erase 23 years of you being her father. But as I sat there, looking at this man who'd never stopped fighting for his daughter, I realized something that made my stomach turn. Sarah wasn't just choosing Marcus because he was her biological father. She was choosing him because he'd never stopped wanting her. While I'd been paranoid about her leaving, building walls to keep her close, Marcus had been building bridges to bring her home. While I'd been afraid of losing her, he'd been brave enough to search for her. While I'd been holding on with desperation, he'd been holding on with hope. The drive home was the longest 2 hours of my life. I kept thinking about what Marcus had said, that he wasn't trying to replace me. But what if that didn't matter? What if the damage was already done? What if Sarah's choice wasn't about biology at all, but about the difference between a father who'd held her back and a father who'd never stopped believing in finding her? That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Sarah. Not to check on her, not to ask when she was coming home, but to actually listen to what she had to say. Dad? Her voice was surprised, cautious. Is everything okay? I went to see Marcus today, I said, and the silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. You did what? When she spoke again, her voice was sharp with something between anger and fear. Dad, why would you do that? Because I needed to understand. I needed to see who was taking my daughter away from me. No one is taking me anywhere. Sarah's voice cracked, and I could hear tears starting. God, Dad, why does everything have to be about you losing me? Why can't it be about me finding something I've been missing my whole life? It was the first time she'd been completely honest with me in months, and the truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about her choosing Marcus over me. This was about her trying to understand herself, and I'd been too terrified of losing her to see it. Tell me, I said quietly. Tell me what you've been missing. The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. Sarah told me about feeling different her whole life, about wondering where her love of music came from when neither Linda nor I was musical, about her recurring dreams that made no sense until Marcus told her about the lullabies he'd written for her before she was born. He kept them, Dad, 23 years, and he kept the songs he wrote for me. He played them for me last week, and I remembered the melodies. I remembered them from dreams I've had since I was little. She told me about the way Marcus moved his hands when he talked, the same way she did, about his laugh, which sounded like hers, about the way he organized his books, which was exactly how she'd organized hers since childhood. It's not that I didn't love you, she said, her voice breaking. It's that I never understood myself, and now I do. But then she said something that made me realize how badly I'd misunderstood everything. Dad, I'm not choosing him over you. I'm trying to choose both of you. But you keep acting like loving him means I have to stop loving you. And that's not how love works. I thought about my own father, the man who'd raised me, and how learning about my biological father hadn't diminished my love for the man who'd been there every day. I thought about how I'd been so afraid of losing Sarah that I'd been pushing her away. "I know about what you did," she said quietly. "Marcus told me about the legal battles, about how you made sure the adoption went through quickly. He told me you were protecting me." My heart stopped. "Sarah, No, let me finish." Her voice was steady now, mature in a way that reminded me she wasn't a child anymore. "I understand why you did it. I understand that you wanted to be my father so badly that you were willing to fight for it. But Dad, you didn't have to fight. You earned the right to be my father every single day for 23 years. We talked about the DNA test I'd run behind her back. She wasn't angry about that either, just sad that I'd felt I needed to prove something that had never been in question. "The test doesn't make you less my father," she said. "It just makes Marcus my father too." For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Sarah wasn't abandoning me. She was expanding her definition of family, and I'd been too scared to see the difference. "I want to meet him properly," I said. "I want to try to understand this from your perspective." "Really?" The hope in her voice made me realize how much my fear had been hurting her. "Really. But Sarah, I need you to understand something too. I'm scared. I'm scared that now that you have your biological father, you won't need the man who raised you anymore." "Dad," she said softly, "I will always need you. You're the one who taught me how to ride a bike, how to drive, how to be brave. You're the one who held me when I cried, who celebrated my victories, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Marcus may be my biological father, but you're my dad. There's a difference." But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still missing something. Sarah had forgiven me, Marcus had shown me grace, and yet I felt like there was still a piece of this puzzle that didn't fit. The secret I'd been carrying for 23 years was more complicated than just knowing about Marcus. What if the real reason I'd fought so hard to keep Sarah was because I'd known something that would change everything about how she saw both of us? What if the choice between Marcus and me wasn't the real choice at all? Linda found me in the garage at 2 in the morning, sitting in my car with the engine off, staring at nothing. I'd been there for hours, turning over the conversation with Sarah, trying to understand why I still felt like I was drowning, even though she'd forgiven me. "David," she said, tapping on the window, "come inside. We need to talk." I knew that tone. It was the same one she'd used when she told me about her affair 15 years ago. The same one she'd used when she told me about the cancer scare that turned out to be nothing. It was the tone that meant secrets were about to be revealed. "I know what you're thinking about," she said once we were sitting at the kitchen table. "And I know why you can't let this go." "Linda, I don't—" "You know, don't you?" she interrupted. "You know about the baby I lost before Sarah." The words hung between us like a physical presence. The baby we'd lost, the baby that would have been biologically ours, the baby that died at 6 months gestation, taking with it our dreams of biological parenthood and setting us on the path to adoption. "I know you think about him," Linda continued. "I know you wonder what he would have looked like, what kind of person he would have been. I know you think about whether Sarah was meant to replace him, or if she was meant to be something else entirely." She was right. I did think about our son, the son who would have been born 2 months after Sarah, the son who would have had Linda's eyes and my stubborn chin, the son who would have made me a father without the complications of adoption, without the fear of biological parents showing up to claim what was theirs. "That's not why I fought for Sarah," I said, but Linda shook her head. "Yes, it is. Part of it is." She reached across the table and took my hand. "David, you need to understand something. I loved Sarah from the moment we brought her home, but I know you loved her differently. You loved her like she was the child we lost. You loved her like she was meant to heal us. I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because she was right. In the darkest part of my heart, I had thought of Sarah as a replacement for the son we'd lost. Not consciously, not deliberately, but in the way we sometimes try to fill holes in our hearts with whatever love we can find. That's why you're so terrified of losing her, Linda continued. It's not just about losing your daughter. It's about losing the last connection to the family we were supposed to have. The tears came then, hot and angry and full of 23 years of guilt. I'd tried so hard to be a good father to Sarah, to love her for who she was instead of who she replaced. But the truth was more complicated than that. I do love her for who she is, I said through the tears. But you're right. I also love her for who she helped me become. And I'm terrified that without her, I'll go back to being the man who couldn't protect his own son. Linda was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle. David, our son's death wasn't your fault. The umbilical cord accident wasn't something you could have prevented. You know that, right? Logically, yes, I knew that. But in the place where logic meets emotion, I'd been carrying the weight of that loss for over 2 decades. I'd been trying to prove that I could be a good father, that I could protect the children in my care, that I deserved to be called Dad. Sarah doesn't know about the baby, I said. No, Linda agreed. We decided not to tell her. We thought it would be too much pressure to know she was adopted because we'd lost a biological child. Should we tell her now? Linda considered this. I think, she said slowly, that might help her understand why you fought so hard for her. But David, you need to be prepared for how she might react. She might feel like she was never really wanted for herself. But she was, I said quickly. She was wanted for herself. She was… I know, Linda interrupted. But will she know that? Will she understand that you can love someone for who they are and who they represent at the same time? The question haunted me for the rest of the night. I kept thinking about Sarah's conversation with me, about how she'd said she understood why I'd fought for her. But she'd understood it in the context of wanting to be a father. She didn't understand it in the context of needing to prove I could keep a child alive. The next morning, I made a decision that I'm still not sure was right. I called Sarah and asked if she wanted to come home for dinner, not to talk about Marcus, not to convince her to choose me, but to tell her about the brother she'd never known she had. There's something about our family that you don't know, I told her over the phone. Something that might help you understand why I've been so afraid of losing you. Dad, you're scaring me. Don't be scared, I said. Just come home. There's a story I should have told you a long time ago. But as I hung up the phone, I wondered if I was making another selfish choice. Was I telling Sarah about our lost son because she needed to know, or because I needed her to understand that losing her would mean losing everything I'd built my identity around? The truth was, I wasn't sure I knew the difference anymore. Sarah arrived at 6 o'clock, and I could see the worry in her eyes. She'd brought Marcus with her, which surprised me, but also felt right. If we were going to talk about family secrets, maybe it was time for all of us to be honest about what family meant. I hope it's okay that I came, Marcus said, and I realized he was as nervous as I was. Sarah asked me to come for moral support. It's fine, I said, and meant it. This story involved him too, in ways he probably didn't understand yet. Linda had made Sarah's favorite meal, chicken parmesan with garlic bread. It was the same meal we'd made for her first birthday with us, the same meal she'd requested every year on the anniversary of her adoption. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were celebrating family while preparing to reveal how complicated that family really was. Before I tell you this story, I said once we were all sitting around the table, I need you to understand that it doesn't change anything about how much we love you, but it might explain why I've been so afraid of losing you. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. Dad, whatever it is, we'll work through it. I started with the pregnancy. Linda and I had been trying for 2 years when she finally got pregnant. We were so excited, so careful, so sure that we were meant to be parents. We picked out names, decorated a nursery, read parenting books. We did everything right. We were going to name him Thomas, I said, watching Sarah's face. Thomas David Peterson. He was going to be born in December, right around Christmas. I told them about the day everything went wrong. Linda was 6 months pregnant, and we'd gone in for what was supposed to be a routine checkup. But the doctor couldn't find a heartbeat, and suddenly, our world collapsed. The umbilical cord had wrapped around Thomas's neck, and he died sometime during the night. I held him, I said, my voice breaking. After Linda delivered him, I held him for 3 hours. He was so small, so perfect. He looked like he was just sleeping. Sarah was crying now, and even Marcus had tears in his eyes. But I wasn't finished. After we lost Thomas, we tried to get pregnant again. For 3 years we tried everything: fertility treatments, specialists, alternative medicine. Nothing worked. The doctors said there was no medical reason why we couldn't have another baby, but Linda's body seemed to have shut down. I told them about the depression that followed, how I'd blamed myself for Thomas's death, how I'd become convinced that I wasn't meant to be a father, how I'd started drinking too much and working too late, anything to avoid going home to the empty nursery we couldn't bear to dismantle. That's when Linda suggested adoption, I continued. She said maybe we were meant to love a child who needed us, instead of trying to create one from scratch. I looked at Sarah, trying to gauge her reaction. She was listening intently, her hand still holding mine. When we got the call about you, I was terrified, I admitted. I was terrified that I would fail you the way I'd failed Thomas. I was terrified that something would go wrong, that you would be taken away from us, that I would prove once and for all that I wasn't meant to be a father. Is that why you fought so hard against Marcus? Sarah asked quietly. Partly, I said. But Sarah, you need to understand. By the time you were born, I didn't think of you as a replacement for Thomas. I thought of you as a second chance, a chance to prove that I could protect a child, that I could be the father I'd always wanted to be. Marcus spoke for the first time since I'd started the story. I had no idea, he said. I'm sorry. I can't imagine losing a child like that. You did lose a child, I said, looking at him directly. You lost Sarah, and I helped make sure you lost her, not because I didn't think you'd be a good father, but because I was so desperate to prove that I could be one. The room was quiet for a long moment. Sarah was processing. I could see it in her eyes. Linda was crying softly, probably remembering those dark months after Thomas's death. There's something else, I said, because I'd come this far and there was no point in holding back now. Sarah, we never told you about Thomas because we didn't want you to feel like you had to live up to his memory. We didn't want you to feel like you were a replacement child. But I wasn't I? Sarah said, and her voice was steady, not accusatory. I was adopted because you needed a child to love after losing your son. You were adopted because we had love to give, Linda said, speaking for the first time. Yes, we lost Thomas. Yes, that loss made us want to be parents even more. But Sarah, from the moment we held you, you were our daughter, not Thomas's replacement, our daughter. Sarah was quiet for a long time, and I could see her working through the implications of what she'd learned. Finally, she looked up at me. Dad, I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. When you look at me now, Do you see Thomas? Do you see the son you lost? The question cut deep, but I knew she deserved the truth. Sometimes, I said. Not because you look like him or act like him, but because loving you taught me that I could be the father I was never able to be to him. When I see you succeed, when I see you happy, when I see you making good choices. Yes, sometimes I think about Thomas and wonder if I would have been as good a father to him as I've tried to be to you. And that's why you're so scared of losing me, Sarah said. Because losing me would mean losing your proof that you're a good father. Sarah, it's okay, Dad. I understand now. I understand why you fought so hard for me, why you've been so afraid of Marcus, why you've held on so tight. You didn't just see me as your daughter. You saw me as evidence that you could keep a child safe. She was right, and hearing her say it out loud made me realize how unfair I'd been to her. I'd put the weight of my grief and guilt on her shoulders without even realizing it. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry for making you carry that without knowing it. Don't be sorry, Sarah said. Be proud, because Dad, you did keep me safe. You did prove you could be a good father. You did everything you were afraid you couldn't do. Marcus cleared his throat. I think, he said carefully, that this explains a lot about why this situation has been so hard. David, you weren't just afraid of losing Sarah, you were afraid of losing your identity as a father. And you weren't just trying to get to know your daughter, I said, understanding finally dawning. You were trying to get back the child you'd lost too. We were all quiet, processing this new understanding. Two fathers, both shaped by loss, both trying to love the same daughter in the only ways we knew how. I think, Sarah said slowly, that maybe it's time we all stopped being afraid of losing each other and started figuring out how to love each other. The week after our family dinner, something shifted. Not dramatically, no grand gestures or tearful reconciliations, but in the small, quiet ways that real change happens. Sarah started coming home more often, not because she felt guilty, but because she wanted to. Marcus and I began texting about neutral topics, sports, weather, books Sarah had recommended to both of us, but the real change was in me. For the first time in months, I wasn't walking around with the constant fear that I was about to lose everything. Telling Sarah about Thomas had done something I hadn't expected. It had freed me from the weight of proving myself worthy of being her father. You seem different, Linda observed one evening as we were doing dishes together. Lighter. I feel lighter, I admitted. Like I've been holding my breath for 23 years, and I can finally exhale. That's when Sarah called with news that would test this newfound peace. Dad, I need to tell you something, she said, and I could hear nervous excitement in her voice. Marcus has asked me to move to Seattle. He wants me to work for his construction company, learn the business. He says he wants to retire in a few years and pass it on to me. My first instinct was panic. Seattle was 2 hours away. If Sarah moved there, I would see her even less than I did now. She would build a life with Marcus, and I would become the weekend visit, the phone call, the afterthought. But then I remembered the conversation we'd had about Thomas, about how my fear of losing her had been strangling our relationship. I remembered Sarah's words. Maybe it's time we all stopped being afraid of losing each other and started figuring out how to love each other. What do you want to do? I asked, instead of launching into all the reasons she shouldn't go. I want to do it, she said. I want to learn about construction, about running a business. I want to spend time with Marcus and get to know him better. But Dad, I also want to make sure you're okay with it. Sarah, you don't need my permission to live your life. I know, she said, but I want your blessing. I want to know that you understand this isn't about choosing him over you. I thought about that. Was I okay with Sarah moving to Seattle? Was I okay with her working for Marcus, learning his business, potentially inheriting his company? Was I okay with her building a life that didn't revolve around me? I'm scared, I told her honestly. I'm scared that if you move away, you'll realize you don't need me anymore. I'm scared that Marcus will become your primary father figure and I'll become a memory. Dad, Sarah said gently, you raised me. You taught me my values, my work ethic, my sense of right and wrong. You think a change of address is going to erase 23 years of that? When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous, she said, but not unkindly. Dad, I'm going to Seattle to learn about construction and get to know my biological father. But I'm taking everything you taught me with me. I'm taking your integrity, your compassion, your terrible jokes that you think are funny. I'm taking the way you taught me to treat people, the way you showed me what it means to be reliable and honest. Marcus may be teaching me about business, but you taught me about life. That night, I called Marcus. I hear you've offered Sarah a job, I said. I have, he said cautiously. Is that a problem? No, I said, and I meant it. I think it's exactly what she needs. A chance to learn something new, to understand a different part of herself. I want you to know that I support it. David, Thank you. I didn't expect that. I have a favor to ask, I said. I want to be involved somehow, not in the business. I don't know anything about construction, but in Sarah's life. I want to make sure that her moving to Seattle doesn't mean I only see her on holidays. What did you have in mind? I want to help her move. I want to see her apartment, meet her coworkers, understand her new life. I want to be part of this transition, not just a casualty of it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know what? I think that's a great idea. And David, I think Sarah would love that. The conversation continued for over an hour. We talked about Sarah's strengths and weaknesses, about what kind of work she might enjoy, about how to help her navigate the transition from bookstore clerk to business owner. We talked like two fathers who both wanted what was best for their daughter. For the first time since this whole situation began, I felt like Marcus and I were on the same team. There's something else, Marcus said as we were wrapping up. I want you to know that I'm not trying to replace you. I know I said that before, but I'm not sure you believed me. I'm trying to add to Sarah's life, not subtract from it. I believe you, I said. And Marcus, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did 23 years ago, and I'm sorry for how I've handled this situation. I was so afraid of losing her that I couldn't see that gaining you might be good for her. We were both just trying to be fathers, Marcus said. Maybe we can figure out how to do that together. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Sarah was moving to Seattle, and instead of seeing it as an ending, I was going to help make it a beginning for all of us. Moving day arrived on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Sarah had first met Marcus. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us. We'd all spent the last year figuring out how to be a family, and now we were taking the next step in that journey. Marcus had rented a U-Haul, and I'd taken the day off work to help load it. Linda had made sandwiches and coffee for everyone, treating the move like a celebration rather than a loss. Sarah was nervous but excited, the kind of energy that comes from standing at the edge of something new and important. I can't believe I'm actually doing this, she said, as we loaded boxes into the truck. Having second thoughts? I asked, but I wasn't fishing for reasons to convince her to stay. I was genuinely asking. No, she said firmly. I'm scared, but not having second thoughts. This feels right. As we worked, I found myself watching the dynamics between all of us. Marcus and I had developed an easy working relationship, the kind that comes from shared purpose. Sarah moved between us naturally, accepting help from both of us, including both of us in decisions about where things should go. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said during a break. "A year ago, I thought I had to choose between you two. I thought loving Marcus meant betraying you, and loving you meant ignoring Marcus. I never imagined we could all just be family together." "What changed your mind?" Marcus asked. "Dad's story about Thomas," Sarah said without hesitation. "When I understood why he was so scared of losing me, I realized that this was never about choosing sides. It was about understanding that families can be complicated and still be loving." That afternoon, we drove to Seattle in a convoy, Marcus and Sarah in the U-Haul, Linda and I following in our car. The drive gave Linda and me time to talk about what this change meant for us. "Are you okay with this?" Linda asked. "Really okay?" "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. "I'm sad that she won't be just down the hall anymore, but I'm not afraid. For the first time in months, I'm not afraid." "What changed?" "I realized that I raised her to be independent, to make her own choices, to build her own life. Fighting against that would mean fighting against everything I taught her." Sarah's new apartment was small but bright, with windows that looked out over Elliott Bay. As we unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, I found myself thinking about how proud I was of her. Not just for having the courage to make this move, but for the way she'd handled this entire impossible situation. "Dad," she said as we were setting up her bookshelf, "I want to show you something." She pulled out a photo album I'd never seen before. It was filled with pictures of our family, holidays, birthdays, vacations, ordinary moments that had been captured over the years. But interspersed with our family photos were new pictures: Sarah and Marcus at lunch, Sarah and Marcus at a baseball game, Sarah and Marcus looking at blueprints at a construction site. "I've been making this," she said. "A record of our family. All of us. Because that's what we are now, isn't it? A family." I looked at the pictures, this visual representation of how our family had grown and changed, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. Not just for Sarah, but for Marcus too. For the way he'd handled this situation with grace. For the way he'd welcomed me into his relationship with Sarah instead of pushing me out. "There's something I want to say," I said, gathering everyone in the living room once we'd finished unpacking. "To all of you." I looked at Sarah first. "Sarah, I spent so much time being afraid of losing you that I almost lost sight of how proud I am of you. You've handled this situation with more maturity and wisdom than I have. You've shown me what it means to love without fear." I turned to Marcus. "Marcus, I owe you an apology that goes beyond what I said before. I didn't just interfere with your rights as a father. I robbed you of 23 years with your daughter. I can't give you those years back, but I can promise you that I'll never stand between you and Sarah again." Finally, I looked at Linda. "Linda, you've been the steady hand in all of this. You've helped me understand that love isn't about possession. It's about wanting what's best for the people we care about, even when that's hard for us." "Dad," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, "I need you to know something. Having Marcus in my life doesn't diminish what you mean to me. It makes me appreciate it more. Because now I understand the difference between being someone's father because you have to be, and being someone's father because you choose to be every single day." That evening, we all had dinner together at a restaurant near Sarah's apartment. As we sat around the table, talking and laughing, I realized that this was what family actually looked like. Not the perfect nuclear family I'd always imagined, but something messier and more complicated and more beautiful. "I have an announcement," Sarah said as we were finishing dessert. "I want to officially invite both of you to walk me down the aisle when I get married someday." Marcus and I looked at each other, surprised. "Both of us?" I asked. "Both of you," Sarah said firmly, "because you're both my fathers, and I don't want to choose." As we left the restaurant, I felt like we were walking into the future instead of away from the past. Sarah was starting a new chapter of her life, but we were all writing it together. 6 months have passed since Sarah moved to Seattle, and I'm writing this from the desk in what used to be her bedroom. But it's not a shrine to what I lost anymore. It's my office, a place where I work on the book I'm writing about this experience. The room still smells faintly of her perfume, but now it smells like possibility too. Sarah calls me every Sunday morning, the same time she used to come downstairs for breakfast when she lived at home. We talk about her work at Marcus's company, about the classes she's taking in business management, about the life she's building in Seattle. But we also talk about memories, about the funny things that happened when she was growing up, about the way she used to mispronounce words and insist she was right. "Dad," she said during our call last week, "I've been thinking about Thomas lately." "You have?" "I've been thinking about how he shaped our family, even though he was never really part of it. And I've been thinking about how much you would have loved him, and how much he would have loved you." I had to pause the conversation because I was crying, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I think about him too," I told her. "But Sarah, I want you to know that thinking about Thomas doesn't make me love you less. It makes me love you more, because it reminds me how precious the time we have with the people we love really is." "I know, Dad, and I think that's why you were such a good father to me, because you understood how fragile family can be." Last month, Marcus and I started a tradition. Every other Saturday, we meet halfway between Portland and Seattle at a diner in Centralia. We talk about Sarah, about our own lives, about sports and politics and books. We're not best friends, but we're something I never expected we could be. We're family. During our last meeting, he told me something that changed how I see this entire story. "David," he said, "I need to tell you something. When I first found Sarah, I was angry. I was angry at you, at the system, at the 23 years I'd lost. But watching you with her, seeing how much you love her, seeing the man she became because of how you raised her, I'm not angry anymore. Marcus, no, let me finish. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that Sarah had you when I couldn't be there. I'm grateful that she was raised by someone who loved her as much as I would have. I'm grateful that she had a father who was present for all the moments I missed." 3 weeks ago, Sarah called with news that made my heart skip a beat. "Dad, I have something to tell you. I'm pregnant." The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was joy so pure I couldn't speak. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here," I managed. I'm so happy for you, Sarah." "I wanted you to be the first to know," she said. "Well, you and Marcus. I'm calling him right after I call you." "What about the father?" I asked, because I'd been so focused on her career that I'd missed the signs of a serious relationship. "His name is James. He's a good man, Dad. He's kind and funny, and he makes me laugh. You're going to love him." "When do I get to meet him?" "How about next weekend? I want to bring him to Portland, introduce him to the family. All of the family." So, next weekend, Sarah is coming home with the man she loves, and Marcus is driving down from Seattle. We're going to have dinner together, Linda and I, Sarah and James, Marcus and his girlfriend Patricia, who I'm finally going to meet. We're going to be a family in all its complicated, beautiful, imperfect glory. I've been thinking about what I want to say to James when I meet him. I want to tell him that Sarah is strong and independent and brilliant, but also that she needs someone who will love her unconditionally. I want to tell him that being part of our family means accepting that family can be complicated, that love isn't always simple, that sometimes the people who matter most to us aren't the ones we started with. But mostly, I want to tell him that Sarah taught me the most important lesson of my life, that love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go at the right time in the right way, for the right reasons. I'm going to be a grandfather. Sarah's baby will call me Grandpa, and they'll call Marcus Grandpa too, and that child will grow up knowing that family isn't about biology or law or obligation. It's about the people who show up, who stay, who love you through the complications and the changes and the impossible choices. As I finish writing this story, I want you to know that I'm not the same man who sat in Sarah's bedroom 8 months ago, drowning in fear and anger and the terror of losing everything. I'm a man who learned that love is bigger than fear, that family is more expansive than blood, that the worst thing you think can happen to you might actually be the best thing that ever did. If you're listening to this story because you're afraid of losing someone you love, I want you to know that sometimes the only way to keep them is to let them go. If you're listening because you don't know how to compete with biology or history or the pull of someone's past, I want you to know that love isn't a competition, it's a collaboration. And if you're listening because you're trying to figure out what family means, I want you to tell you what I learned. Family is the people who choose to love you, day after day, year after year, through all the changes and challenges and impossible situations life throws at you. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for letting me share the story of how I learned to be a father, not just to the daughter I raised, but to the man I became in the process. If this story touched you, if it helped you understand something about love, or family, or the courage it takes to let go, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about the messy, complicated, beautiful business of being human. And remember, love isn't about holding on. It's about holding space for the people we care about to become who they're meant to be, even when that means letting them go.